What's up, guys? So, something I wanted to talk about today is something that I've learned recently, right? Um, Not recently. I've been thinking about this for a long time, right? So, I've read The Millionaire Fastlane. I've read The 4 Hour Work Week, right? And that's really what inspired it. It was mainly The Millionaire Fastlane, right? And what inspired it was building like a business system, a business that gives you the freedom to live anywhere you want, not to have geographic limits, right? Financial freedom, have systems in place so you get paid while you sleep, right? And you have to know how to do it. And something that I really noticed is, so there's a YouTube channel that I followed. I'm going to reference him so he doesn't think I'm just stealing his shit. But there's this YouTube channel, First Man. He was in the self improvement space. I think now he's in a different type of space. He has vlogs and stuff like that. Which good for him. I don't blame him. He wanted to move on to different endeavors. But basically what I noticed with his channel, right? What he talked about like life setup. He talked about, he even has a course. I went through the course. He talks about life setup and the way you should live. And I don't want to steal his content. I just want to talk about my opinion, my personal perspective on it because I've been thinking about this type of thing for a while now. Obviously, he opened my eyes. He taught me new things about it, which I'm going to talk about as well. But what I noticed about life setup, right? He talked about how most people live boring fucking lives, right? They may. I'll give you an example. I grew up in New York, so I'm going to give you an example of the average middle class person who has a job or someone who has money, a really good paying job, and they live in a big suburban house in Scarsdale, New York, right? Which is a rich suburb of New York. So that person might work in Wall Street. They might take the Metro North every Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, right? And they may take the same commute from Scarsdale train station to Grand Central Station in Manhattan, right? The famous Grand Central Station. Maybe take the was it the two train? The two train from Grand Central down all the way to Wall Street, right? They do that same commute every day, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. They do it for the vast majority of the year. Maybe they have 2 weeks of vacation, and sure, there's no issue about it, right? But the fault I see with it, right, this is why. So I went to college, right? I didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do when I went to college. I just said I want to go to. I want to make money, sure, whatever, right? Everyone tells you to go to college is the right thing to do, so you go, and then you find out, oh, you go to college so you could get a job and do that for 30 years. And to me, that didn't really make sense to me. That didn't really resonate with me. It terrified me because I'm like, is that going to be my life? Is my life going to be me taking the train to the same fucking office to a job I probably low key hate, right? To dealing in a Machiavellian type of office environment. Because if we're going to be real here, corporate offices are constant power games. There's constant. You have to manage people's egos. You have to manage insecurities. You have to manage envy. You have to manage gossips. You have to manage all this shit, right? And this is stuff that you don't really have to deal with as much when you're an entrepreneur, which is why I went towards the entrepreneurial route, right? But let's look back. Let's look back at it, right? So about life setup, right? Most people, even people who have money, they'll live in like a $10 million mansion, a $10 million home in Scarsdale, New York, right? A big home, nice suburban home. Maybe the wife and kids are there, right? But it's a very mundane, boring life. Like I lived in the suburbs before I moved to Chicago, and the suburbs are so fucking boring. First of all, you're kind of isolated, right? Even I grew up outside of New York City, right? I was still bored, right? As an adult in my 20s, I was very bored. it's almost like depressing. You don't really talk to people as much, and everything is far away, right? So my life setup at that time was kind of shit. It was it was terrible. It wasn't great. I wasn't really meeting people. I wasn't around socializing with people, which, you know, I do think that you need to network, right? And you need to lower that friction. If I have to take an hour commute every time to go to New York City, it's going to be very inconvenient, and I'm less likely to go out and socialize with people, right? So it took a hit on my networking, on my meeting other like minded people, because the ambitious people are in New York City, right? Or in any big city. Or the women I want to date, right? They're most likely going to be in the big city. They're not going to be in boring little suburban town outside of a major city. It's just, it doesn't work that way, right? So, going back to the life setup, this is what most people think as wealth or as success, right? Right? The person has a lot of money, but they live in a boring fucking suburb. And this is what I like what First Man talked about. He talked about how you need to be able to live in you need to be able to like there should be a purpose behind where you live, right? Basically. So, for example, right, he talks about how you can get a nice apartment right in the middle of the city that you rent. I'll give New York City as an example. So I talked about New York City. You get a nice apartment in Manhattan, right? And it gives you proximity to all the places you want to be at in the city, all the restaurants, the social scene, the nightlife, um, the networking opportunities. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it gives you access to the events that are going on in the city, right? And he talks about how that's super important, right? Because if you make a lot of money, but you live in the middle of nowhere, or you live far, or you live inconveniently, it's just it's really poor life setup. He talks about it in that sense. And the way I see it is I agree with that, right? And I know there's different ways of doing it. And I wanted to talk about this because I notice most people, the vast majority of people, don't really understand this. They don't understand how to spend their own money. They don't understand how to spend money. And I'm not talking about buying nice things. Sure, you can buy if you can afford to buy a Louis Vuitton belt and it doesn't affect your life, it doesn't affect your living expenses, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't it's not going to throw you off your game if you buy a $1,000 Louis Vuitton belt, then yeah, go right ahead, buy it. But the issue is people will buy a Louis Vuitton belt, they'll get a Mercedes, they'll get a big house in the suburbs to look rich, when in reality they just put themselves in a deep amount of debt. Why? Because they want to impress people that they don't even like, or they want to look like they're more successful than they actually are, right? Maybe they're making 200K from their job, but now they put themselves in a big debt trap, and now they're stuck in that lifestyle that they're not the biggest fans about, right? So the way I see it is, how about the guy who's making far less money? Say he's making 80K a year, 100K. Okay, let's say 100K a year, right? Because that's a good starting point, right? The guy's making 100K a year. He's making less than the guy who's making 200K. But instead of buying a big house or a really nice car, maybe he just lives in a city like New York or Chicago and he takes a subway everywhere, right? If you're in Chicago, you call it the L, but it's the same. To me, I call it the subway because I'm from New York. So you take the subway everywhere, right? You take the subway. Occasionally, if you take an Uber, you order an Uber, but you don't really find the need to have a car, right? So right there, that's an expense that you don't need to waste money on. And then maybe you rent an apartment. You rent an apartment in downtown or right near downtown. So now you're within proximity of having a social life, of having an enjoyable life, of networking, of co-working spaces, right? And that's something you won't get if you're in the middle of nowhere. You won't have access to these things, right? And maybe you want to be around a more attractive women. So you situate yourself in these cool areas in the city, in in the city, near the city, wherever you want to be, right? And you're also within 20 minutes of the airport if you want to go travel. And that's another thing. If you have an online business, right? Or you have some sort of online income, it could be whatever, freelancing, it could be you have a remote job. This is what a lot of digital nomads do. But if you're bored of being in New York or Chicago, right? Or you don't want to live there. You're like, I don't really want to be in the US right now. I want to experience, I want to see more of the world, right? And I don't want to just go on a 1 week trip, right? I want to actually like experience how it's like to live there. So maybe you look at a place like Medellin in Colombia, right? And you're like, Medellin, what a nice. I've always wanted my Spanish to get better. The Colombian women are beautiful. The food is great. Why not go there and experience how it's like to live there for 3 months and see how it's like, right? And sure, it might not be the you might like it, you might not like it, but why not experience it? It's going to build you in some sort of way, right? And I've always talked about how solo travel kind of does that to you. And I don't think it's about being rich, right? So this guy makes 100K. He has a decent apartment. He has nothing out of this world. It's like a one room apartment or even a studio apartment in Manhattan, right? He's paying what, 3K a month? I'm going to say 3K because that's realistic for like a decent place in Manhattan. Studio. It would have to be a studio. He's in the middle, he's in a place where you want to be in Manhattan. He travels every once in a while, right? He's near the airport. If he wants to get out of Manhattan, he has the option to go away for a few months to go somewhere else to another country, right? I think that's like a reasonable way of seeing life set up, and it's a little different than what I've learned from it. But the way I see it is, why not why not give yourself the flexibility to be able to travel, right? To be able to do things that are actually kind of enjoyable for your life, right? Maybe you want to go check out Europe, more of Europe for a month as an American. You're like, you know what? America's very similar, regardless of what state you're from, where in the US, you do feel like you're still in America. Why not go to a different culture, expose myself to different foods, a different language, and go experience it, go check it out, right? Or go to Thailand. Maybe you want to get better at Muay Thai. I love Muay Thai. So maybe you go to Thailand, you go to you train Muay Thai and you kick the pads and you train at some of the best gyms and you pay for privates and you get your own place, right? I don't see there being anything wrong with that, right? But I think the point is, right, the point of the money, the point of having money, I think this is the thing that people misunderstand. People think that you should have the money so to buy expensive things. That's not the point, right? Because if you can afford the expensive things, why not? If you want to buy the expensive things and you can afford it, then 100% buy it. I think that's actually a really cool thing. I'm not going to be one of those guys who's going to tell you don't get it. I think that's a really cool thing. If you can afford it, why not? But if it's going to put you in a hole, if it's going to put you in debt, if it's going to give you bondage, I know MJ DeMarco's talked about that in The Millionaire Fastlane. He talks about how people buy things which puts them in bondage, right? So if it's going to put you in bondage, if you know you're going to buy that Rolex, that $10,000 Rolex, I think this is a low price for a Rolex, but say you buy a $10,000 Rolex and it's going to put you in debt, right? And you're not going to be able to do other things like travel or do enjoyable things that make you happy in your life. You're probably going to hate it, right? Or it's not going to allow you to reinvest into your business. Then it's basically kind of a pointless purchase, right? So obviously, I'm talking about it in a sense that that's my opinion. That's what I think money should be buying you, is freedom and leverage for those things. Because I grew up in Scarsdale, New York. You know, even the people who have money, even the people who make money, who live in nice homes, who drive nice cars, their lives just seem very fucking boring. Like it's just boring. I'm sorry. Like you're gonna be in a big house. You're gonna be you may have a nice big house and you may have a nice car, and you're gonna get bored of that big house. I promise you, you will be bored of that house. You will also be bored of all those cars that you have. I promise you, I don't care if it's a freaking Rolls Royce and a Lamborghini and a Bugatti and a Ferrari. I promise you, you will be bored of those things, right? If you can afford them, that's great. But if it's going to put you in a hole, you probably will be bored of those things. So why give away your freedom just to try to impress people that are probably that you probably don't even care about, right? People that you don't even like. That's a part of it. And a book that I highly recommend you read is Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. He basically talks about it's not about not giving a fuck, it's about choosing what you give a fuck about, right? And it's such a great book because he talks about that many people give a fuck about the wrong things, right? Like when you buy that Mercedes, are you buying it because you genuinely want a Mercedes, or are you buying it because you want to impress other people? Because you give a fuck about what they think. And I think that's what it stems from, right? And if that's what you're going to do, you're not going to be able to you're basically going to shackle yourself, right, in golden handcuffs, right? I know you've heard that term before. So why not build something? Why not even if you're making less money, why not invest it in a life that's actually going to be kind of exciting, right? Stuff that you're going to talk about when you're in your deathbed. Like I don't regret going to backpacking in Europe or going through Asia, living in Asia for a couple of years. I don't regret doing that, right? That's what I think life is about, my personal opinion. And I know I kind of got off topic, but this still kind of goes with the life setup because I just think most people shackle themselves to where they live, right? And if you want an extreme example of it, before I end this video, look at Dan Bilzerian, right? Dan Bilzerian, I know a lot of people give him shit for it, but at the same time, if you read his book and you know a little bit about him, you know, he was able to set up some sort of life setup. And he even talked about how his father was very rigid, he was very principle based, and he hated it. He didn't like the fact that his father was very rigid about it. So he ended up creating his own life, and he almost like manufactured it to be exciting. He set it up that it was exciting, and that excitement naturally attracted women. And that's how he was able to date and sleep with so many women. Really sleep with that many women. And that's because the way he set up his life to be. And that's what you have to know about. So really make that decision. Even if you have a high income, just think about it, right? You have to really think about it because you don't want to keep yourself stuck. That's really it. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I'm going to keep creating more. Subscribe and take care.